Hey guys, I'm back today and I got a request a couple of days ago from a subscriber to do a video on my past job, my career, my real estate career, which I've kind of mentioned here and there, but I've never really gone into very much detail about it. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. And one is, well, you'll hear it when I get into it, but a major part of that business was my mom, and you guys know how sensitive I am about my mom and her passing and stuff, so I guess I wasn't really ready to talk about such a thing that was so closely related to her, and also because it also gets in a little bit into like my past marriage and all that. So I think that's kind of like why I never really got into it, but I think, you know, I'm ready to kind of share that part with you guys, and since it was requested, I thought I'd go ahead and do that video now. So my first job ever was actually in retail when I think I had just turned 17 or was just about to turn 17. And so I did that and for a little bit part-time, and then when I was and I think that was kind of like on and off, but anyways, so when I was 19 years old, I got my first real job, which was a corporate job. I had started with a really wonderful company back in Chicago. It was actually in one of the suburbs, but let's just say Chicago. And I started off as a receptionist. I actually had gone through a recruiting firm, like a headhunter, and I had started off as a receptionist. I went to the interview. I was like 19 years old, scared to death, and I got hired on the spot like 1 hour into the interview. And then 3 months into that job, they promoted me to administrative assistant. And then so I worked for that company for a while, and while I was working, I was also going to school. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I actually went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. I did do some of my courses later on in the Chicago downtown campus, but for most of my college career, I was on the Evanston campus. It did take me a little bit longer to complete my bachelor's degree than the usual 4 years because, as you'll learn, I went through marriage, divorce, childbirth, business, all while I was getting my bachelor's degree. So it was kind of a bit of a ride, but I have to say I still enjoyed every second of my time at Northwestern. I absolutely loved that school. If I ever did go back for my graduate degree, I would hope that I would be able to do it at Northwestern again. I mean, that place holds my heart. So when I got married, and I think a couple months into, or like 2 months into a couple months into my marriage, I was pregnant, and completely unplanned, and soon afterwards I found out that my husband, right when I told him, he did not want the baby at all. He wanted to wait until he got his green card, which raised a lot of red flags for myself and also for my family. So I think a couple of months into my pregnancy, I actually ended up moving away from my place back to my parents' place, just because they wanted to make sure that I was happy and healthy, as happy as I could be while I was pregnant with my eldest son, my firstborn. So during that time is when my mom had just recently switched careers. So my parents were always very like business owners. They had done different businesses and things like that, but my mom was just at that point where she was kind of recreating and redefining her life, and so she had gotten into real estate. And because of her connections and contacts, she knew a lot of people in Chicago. Just to kind of give you a little bit of history on her, she actually got an award from the mayor for having the first Urdu magazine published in the actual language. So now it wasn't like a ethnic magazine published in English. She actually had her own printing press and published the magazine and things like that. So she was basically very well known in the community. And so when she got into real estate, she was able to really use a lot of her contacts and her friends and just her connections and stuff to build a pretty booming business. And so she started at Century 21 when she first started. And so she was like really into that when I was going through all of that, and I had just moved back into with my parents. And at that time, I have a younger brother that's 4 years younger than me, and then I have a younger sister that's 7 years younger than me, so they're pretty much babies. My sister was a teenager, I think, at that time. So I moved back, and now I was still in school, still trying to, get my bachelor's. And so I was in this panic, because I knew that, possibly my marriage might not work out. And even though I was financially independent, my husband was not supporting me my ex-husband was not supporting me or anything like that. I knew that I wouldn't be able to hold a corporate job and finish school and have a baby. So my mom was really trying to get me to do real estate. And so I guess out of my panic and just trying to figure it out, she kept telling me, you have to get into this. I already have clients, like I need somebody. So basically I started helping her with a couple of her clients. And I didn't have a real estate like certificate or anything like this at this point. I just would like help her with showings and things like that. And just like a couple months into it, I started really enjoying it and seeing some real like money potential in it. So I went to I don't remember, did I do mine online? I had several certificates that I ended up getting at that point, so I don't remember if I did the real estate one in school or if I did it online. I did go to school for that, actually. So I did like a fast-paced, I just needed my real estate license because my mom already had a very much booming business, so I just needed to do it quick. And I think I did it like where you just go like straight for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you get, and everything I'm telling you, of course, is dated from when, back in Chicago, so I'm sure it's changed now. So I went and got my real estate license, started working with my mom at Century 21, and I remember after the first 6 months of us working together. So the way it works is that when you start with Century 21, you are paying like, you work at a tier, so whatever you're earning, you pay like a certain percentage to your brokerage firm. And so she was at a higher tier already. She was at like 90%, so she was getting 90% and 10% was going to Century 21. So if I started on my own, I would have to pay 50% and work my way up. So she said that, why don't you just partner up with me and we'll do it together. So in the first 6 months, there were 200 agents in that Century 21 office, and she was in the top 2. In fact, if you guys can picture this, she's like this, little Pakistani girl. Like she's in her, what was she, in her early 40s by that time, I think. 4'11" was her height. English was not her first language, so she had a very strong accent, and we had people slashing our tires. Other real estate agents were just not happy with my mother's presence there. She just came in and like just kicked butt, literally. And I mean, I think back to it now, and it's funny to me now that all these like grown men and other like successful real estate agents like felt threatened by this like little woman that was like 4'11", and she was an amazing salesperson. I mean, she was just rocking it. And so I feel honored to be able to have worked under her. I'm not gonna get emotional. That's why I can't do videos where my mom is involved, because it's really hard for me. So anyway, 6 months into it, we I remember there was a contest. We were getting vacations, we were getting like bonuses. I mean, it was amazing. And so basically that's how my pregnancy passed through, because I was in my personal life going through this really awful divorce, and just having to figure out being like pregnant and divorce and baby coming and all this stuff. But in my career wise, I was building this really booming real estate business. So after the baby was born, my sister, and I have to give her 100% credit for this, because she was a teenager in high school, and she was basically managing. So my sister, my mom, my brother, and myself would manage like Armand's schedule so that he didn't have to go to daycare. So there was always somebody at home watching him, and I feel blessed that my parents and my family was like always there for me. So by this time, I think that's when my brother came in, because our business was growing so well. We were doing really good, that we had my brother come in. And I think when he signed up with 2021 is when we really started thinking about branching out and opening our own real estate firm, because with the 3 team, it didn't make sense to be paying all these like fees to the brokerage and also having to go under their rules. So at that time we started looking into opening our own company. After I had my son, I will say that I realized that the time that it spent me, like I would have clients that would say, okay, they want such and such of a house. And if you got, real estate is a very, very exciting business. And when I was in it, it was like really booming. So it was just a really exciting time. And I would spend like 3 or 4 months with a client, finding them the perfect home. And then I'd make my commission. And I found out very quickly that if I went into commercial, like not even commercial, what I was dealing with basically, I don't think they came into really commercial, but like 2 and 3 story unit buildings in Chicago. At the time they used to go from anywhere from 450,000 to like 600,000. And so I found a lot of, just through my mom's connection, I was able to find a lot of investors that basically would buy these 2, 3, 4 story buildings, not even care how they were. Like they wouldn't spend even time, sometimes they wouldn't even go to the showings, like they wouldn't show up. They would just look at the numbers, like how much can you get for rent and how much money did they have to put in, how much could they flip it for, that sort of thing. So I quickly transitioned myself, even though I was still with my mom's company, like when we opened our own real estate firm, I quickly branched myself off into that niche. And a big part of that came was when I was trying to lose the baby weight, I hired a trainer. I'm sorry this is kind of choppy and stuff because it's set so old, like I'm kind of going back, and I've actually never discussed this with anybody else, so I'm just kind of like the timeline might be a little off for me now. But so when I was trying to lose the baby weight, I went and I hired a trainer at a gym, and I was working out 2 or 3 hours a week with this guy, and we would talk about all sorts of different things. But through, I don't remember, one of the times that we were working out, he was telling me how he had saved up $60,000 to buy his dream car, and how it had taken him so long, and that he didn't want to buy the car until he had the cash in his hands. He didn't want to finance it, this and that. And so I'm like, are you crazy? You have $60,000 and you're going to go blow it on a car the minute you drive off the lot, yada, 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 that whole spiel. So I basically, long story short, convinced him to buy a 2-unit building in Evanston. So when I used to go to school in Evanston, if you guys are familiar with that area, there is a really good part of Evanston, which is like that northwestern campus area, and then there's a really, really bad part of Evanston, which is it was at the time drug infested, all sorts of things going on over there. But the buildings there were, or the homes and the 2-unit buildings there were really cheap, and a lot of them were Section 8 and things like that, where you were guaranteed rent. So I convinced him basically to buy this 2-unit building where 1 unit was empty and he could live in there, and 1 unit was rented out already, so he was getting this income. So basically he would have to pay like less in rent from what he was already paying, and he was his building would eventually pay for itself. Once he got that deal, he was so appreciative that he got me a ton of clients. I eventually ended up hiring his cousin to be my assistant, and I started kind of working in that area. Now, just to kind of give you guys a recap of like that area, in case you guys are not familiar with it. Cops were like, you could say that like certain cops would be afraid to go into that area. So it needed help, and it took a certain type of people that would be able to handle that situation. I remember this one time I was standing in a building talking to like the resident, the person that lived there, and there was a report on the table where, I don't know if it was her husband or her brother or her son, had just been in like jail for like molesting a woman, and I was standing there thinking, what the hell am I doing here? But eventually I got to know a couple of the police officers that worked in that area. There was one in particular that was an undercover cop. I think he was a narcotics agent. Because he was always like in plainclothes and he knew a lot of the drug activity in the area. He would always say, text me when you're going to be in the area showing a building. He would keep an eye out for me, keep an eye out for my car and things like that. I found a legal husband and wife team that had an Evanston office location, so they kind of knew how to work with the Section 8 people. And I'm sorry if this is like too much information for you guys, but I don't know what you guys would want to know. So basically that's kind of how I started out working with my mom and doing mainly residential, but I found this little niche because I was spending so much time in Evanston, and also because it made more sense for me to do my showings and my business mostly in Evanston because it was easier for me to get to school that way too. So I was on campus for my classes and I can kind of run back and forth between showings and my investors and things like that. So there were a lot of key players, I think, in my success in real estate. My mom definitely, my people that I met that I was able to kind of get referrals from, so that my trainer who got me tons of people, he actually had a cousin that had been clean, like his cousin had been like on drugs and he was clean for 6 months, and so he asked me, hey, I've got this guy that he's clean and all that, and he's looking for a job, can you put him up somewhere, get him a job and stuff. And I said, well, I need somebody that can go and do showings with me and kind of almost be like a bodyguard for me, and if he can do a drug test and you can kind of vouch for him, I'd be willing to give him a job. So he was somebody that kind of was with me, and I would feel safe because I knew that I'm going into these dangerous situations sometimes. I mean, it wasn't always bad, but there were situations where things would happen. I remember this one time, I don't know if it was a drug issue or what, but there was one of the buildings that I was managing for my client. So a lot of the investors, they would buy the buildings, but they would kind of leave it up to me to get the construction work done, collect rent and that sort of thing. And that's kind of the price I had to pay for them not being there to see the building, because some of them were doctors or lawyers, or they were professionals and they had money to invest, but they didn't have the time to give their buildings. And there was this one building that there was squatters in there, then the building ended up catching on fire because of drug use. A lot of the Section 8 people, sometimes that's kind of what you have to work with. I'm not saying they're all like that, but in the area that we were working, there were issues. So situations like that, I would have to run over there. So sometimes it was evening time, I would be scared. I would have to text my cop friends to kind of watch out for me, meet me there. I would have to take my, my assistant with me. So that's kind of the business. Eventually, I got a mortgage license as well, and just I didn't really do mortgage that much, as I enjoyed real estate, but it made sense to have the mortgage license because we wanted to keep everything in-house. My brother and my mom, we were all in the same real estate. We owned the realty, but we were kind of doing our own thing as well, because my mom wasn't really working in the Evanston area or anything. That was my niche. My brother was doing mainly new construction and things like that. So eventually, just getting tired of dealing with construction companies and things like that, I ended up opening my own construction company and hiring my own crew. That way I had a little bit more control over time schedules, and I was saving money as well, because construction and rehab work can be expensive. So that way I could offer my investors the benefit of, you'll buy the property through me, I'll manage it, I'll do all the construction work, I'll collect the rent and all of that, and when you are ready to sell it, I'll sell it. So everything was in-house. And I always had my mom sort of watching over me too, because she was the more experienced one in the business, and also because she has so many contacts. And there were so many situations where I got myself sort of trapped, and my mom was always there to help me out and give me advice. So that was sort of my anything I'm leaving out. Eventually I did get into buying and flipping myself, because I saw what kind of people, what kind of money people were making. In the course of the 6 years that I was in real estate, I probably owned about 15 properties in my own, for my own personal, either flipping or rehabbing or whatever I was doing. So if I had to guess, I would say about 15 properties. So it was an amazing, amazing experience. My husband and I are still owners, and we have properties that we still rent out and stuff. So of course I put in so many hours. I remember I used to wake up at around 6:30, work like 10-11 hours, go to class, sit in class for 3 hours, come home, play with my son, do homework. I mean, I was working literally 24/7. And I enjoyed every second of it, but it was a lot of hard work. But the experience, I think I will hold dear to my heart forever. It wasn't until my mom really got diagnosed with cancer and we had to really recoup and think about that's how we were spending our time, that the business kind of started coming to an end. And then of course I got remarried and moved out of Chicago. That was when when my husband and I met, and we were talking about marriage. One of the things that he was really set on was that he wanted for me to be a stay-at-home mom. He did not want me to work. It is still a touchy subject with him now. Like, I remember a few times my son's asked me, my oldest son is 11 years old now, and he's asked me, Mom, what are you going to do when Alina goes to school? Alina's 2 now, so it's going to be in the next 3 years. And you know, I've told him I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go back to get my master's. Maybe I'll start working. And it's a very touchy subject with my husband. To give you guys an idea, my friends that knew me when I was doing real estate cannot even imagine me being a stay-at-home mom. Every time I see them or talk to them on the phone, they're always saying, we can't believe, like, out of all the people that we thought, you know, all the things that you could have done, or I would never make the list of people that they thought would be a stay-at-home mom. So, and I've done videos on this before on how the first year was a really tough transition for me, because I had been working since I was 17 years old, and I've always been the kind of person that was running around and doing stuff. And I think that's why YouTube came about, because it kept me from going crazy when I was a stay-at-home mom. So eventually I think I will do something. I just don't know what it is, and I think my husband is not at a place where he's ready to talk about me going back to work or anything like that. So I think he missed out on a really important part of my life, though. He hasn't seen me in that role, and I don't know. I mean, when we met, I was working, but we were only engaged. We knew each other for 2 weeks before we were engaged, and we were engaged for 2 months before we got married. So it was a very short time, and I feel like he missed out on that whole aspect of my life. So I think in the future he might have to experience it, because I don't think I could not do something, whether it's going into business for myself or working or real estate. I don't know yet, but it's definitely in the future. So that's it, guys. I hope that this video was what you guys were expecting. I know it was a little bit going back and forth, but that was my crazy real estate experience. I enjoyed every second of it. I learned a ton, not only about myself, but about business, about other people, about managing your time and your children and family and life and everything. So it's certainly shaped who I am today, and I'm so glad that you requested this, and I'm glad that I got to share it. That's it, guys. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.